Okay, and this is our second video in the HL Paper 3 series for the IB. And this is the video on supply, okay? So the first question is, now we're given a demand function and a supply function, and we'll come to dealing with them together in the next video, I believe, or the video after that, okay? But right now we're only concentrating on supply. So in country X, the supply and demand for widgets, which is an imaginary product, are given by the functions, right? So just the supply is QS minus 45 plus 4.5p. Okay, now I will go into a little bit further in a second what each of these numbers mean. Okay, so the first question says identify the slope of the supply curve. Well, what we're saying is the slope equals the number before p. Okay, that's how we're going to view it. Now I did say in the previous video, and I am correct to say it, if you're looking at it as delta y over delta x, anyone that's doing HL math or whatever, it's technically the reciprocal. It's 1 over the slope is the number before p, but we're not going to worry about that because what the IB wants you to do is just identify the number before p. Okay, so what we're saying is this here is QS minus 45 plus 4.5p. So in this case, the slope is 4.5, but that's actually not the complete answer. I would prefer if you put a plus there. Okay, so what we are saying here is that when we're looking at this, this is the amount that would be supplied at a price of 0, and that would be minus 45 units. Now that's obviously impossible. You can supply 0 and more than 0. You can't supply less. But what we're saying is how this is drawn here is that firms will not consider supplying because it would be touching the quantity axis down around here. So firms would not be considering supplying the good unless the price went above $10 per good. All right, so that's the first thing, and then the number before p, what we're saying is the slope. Okay, that's what we're saying. It's how much quantity supplied will change when price changes by 1 unit. That's what it is. Okay, now onto a little bit, I did say it the math, but within the paper 3 there are some there are some theory questions. So outline the reasons why the quantity supplied, increases as the price rises. Now I have given both answers, but I think you should give both if this question comes up. At a higher price, the profit margin per good sold is greater. So what that is saying is that the amount of money that the firm gets when they sell each good is greater than it was previously before the price increase. And the reason that we can say that is we're assuming a ceteris paribus relationship, which means everything else remains the same. Nothing else has changed. So therefore the firm's costs haven't changed, just the price that they receive for each unit that they sell has. That's the idea there. Okay, so there is an incentive to produce and offer more units for sale. Well, yes, if you get paid more to do something, you're more likely to do it. If the reward to you increases for doing an action, you're more likely to take that action. Okay, so now the next thing which we'll come on to in a later unit is the idea of externalities, right? So you don't need to know about that now, but for the moment the supply curve equals the marginal cost curve for the firm. Externalities tend to deal with society in general, but right now we're just talking about the marginal cost for the firm. That marginal cost is the cost that the firm incurs for producing 1 more unit of output, 1 extra unit of output. So if you are currently producing 100 unit and you produce the 101st unit, the marginal cost of the 101st unit is how much total cost has risen after you've produced that 101st unit compared to before you did. Okay, so since marginal costs rise at higher levels of output, a firm will only be willing to offer more units per period for sale at a higher price. Okay, no problem there, and I hope that makes sense. Now there are two other questions that in this handout that you're going to have to draw a supply curve. So just for the moment, I just want to do kind of essentially step 1 for this question, and then I'll come to drawing a supply curve later on, right? So it says draw and label the supply curve for this supply function, okay? QS equals minus 60 plus 3p. Well, there are a few ways to do this. Okay, so we've got QS equals minus 60 plus 3p. So one way that we can do this is that we can set quantity supplied equal to 0. okay, equal to 0. And then what we can do is solve for P. So when, just to be clear, when we're setting quantity supplied equal to 0, and then this is a different question, but just so you know, just for illustrative purposes, we're finding out where it starts. So there the answer would be 10 because it starts there. It's where it touches the price axis, okay? So what we're going to do then is I'm going to write down 0 equals minus 60 plus 3p. I'm going to bring the 60 over, that's going to change its sign, so get 60 equals 3p. Like in the demand video, whenever you have a variable equal to a number, you divide both sides by the number before the letter you're trying to find. We're trying to find p, so 3p divided by 3 is simply 1p or p, and then 60 divided by 3 is 20. So what we have here is that 20 equals p. So what we're saying is when price is 20, okay, quantity supplied equals 0. So this supply curve, if I were to draw it, and I'll just get my pencil out, I'll draw it here. Now again, just stressing the point, this is a different question, but I'm just showing you that how to draw a supply curve. Okay, now the next one is, well, you see, it's not like demand in that when you're doing the demand function, because it's downward sloping, you can find where it crosses the price axis. So what you would do is you put in 0 for quantity to find where it crosses that axis, just like we've done for supply. But then what you could do is you could put in 0 for P, and that would tell you where it crosses this axis. And we can't do that because the supply curve is upward sloping, indicated by the fact the slope is a positive down here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to choose a random number for price this time and work out the quantity supplied at that price. Now, because like I'm not great at maths, but I can see here that if I choose something like price equals 40, which I will choose, I'll choose P equals 40, okay, this will work out to a nice round number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write QS equals minus 60 plus 3P. QS equals minus 60 plus 3 times, and what I'm going to do instead of P, I'm going to put in 40. QS equals minus 60 plus 120. 3 times 40 is 120. So therefore QS equals 120 minus 60 equals 60. So at a price of 40, we'd get the quantity supplied equals 60. Now, I suppose I should have, I'll just cross this out up here and I'll write P equals 20, QS equals 0. Okay, now I've already put that dot there. So what about P equals 40, QS equals 60? Well, will this work? Well, we'll see. So at a price of 40, we go from here to here. And again, stressing this is a different question, just showing you how to draw a supply curve. And what I do is I line up these two dots with a pencil that is sharper than the one that I have now. And I'd write this as S1, S2, S whatever. Okay, so that's not important, but that's how you would draw that supply curve there. Okay, just that supply curve, that QS equals minus 60 plus 3P, this one here. Okay, so we get rid of that for the moment. Okay, no problem whatsoever. And again, like always, well, you must forgive me because I'll always adjust in papers here, but so you can see, but we're on to a bit more math now. Okay, so whatever about your answer to part C, nobody cares. Okay, that's not even to do with anything. Outline the reason why an increase in cost of production has resulted in a new supply function. Right, well, what we have to understand is firms want to make profit. That's why they're set up. Okay, many firms are set up to serve society only and are non-profits, but unless they make a profit they can't survive. Okay, so this is very important, that you have to realize that profit is not a dirty word. Profit is something that ensures that production of the goods and services that you and I enjoy continues. Okay, so remember that. An increase in the cost of production will reduce the firm's profitability, of course, because we're assuming again a ceteris paribus relationship, and what that actually means is that we're assuming price hasn't changed, but the cost, the amount of money that firms have to pay other firms in order to supply them with the things they need to use to make the goods that they in turn sell, that has increased. So an increase in cost of production will reduce the firm's profitability. Well, what's the effect on that? Causing producers to be less willing and less able to supply the good. Okay, that's what we're saying there. Now, something else, thinking again about profitability and what you should do if you have options. Well, a firm should, and they tend to, choose the most profitable option, okay? So what we're saying is there's two products that are in competitive supply. What that means is that the same resources are used to produce each of the two separate products, okay? And I'll go in, so the example I use here is wheat and barley. So what you need to produce wheat and barley, well, you need land and you need fertilizer and so on and so forth, okay? So you have have a choice. Well, should I produce all wheat or should I produce all barley? All right. Well, it depends. Like every good answer in economics, there's no proper one. There's only if you consider the different scenarios. So using an example, outline how the supply for one of them is likely to be affected by the increase in the price of another. Right, well, an increase in the price of one good, let's say the price of wheat increases, okay? Well, let's ask yourselves these questions. Well, the resource costs haven't changed, okay? The price of the other good, which is barley, hasn't changed. So what has happened to the profitability of wheat compared to the profitability of barley? Well, all I'm saying is it has become at least relatively more profitable to produce wheat, and as such firms are more likely now to produce more wheat and as such less barley than they were in the past. Okay, so let's read through the answer. An increase in the price of one good, like wheat, okay, will cause a decrease in the supply of the other good, like barley, okay? And why? As the two products compete for the same resources needed to grow them. So the profitability of wheat has increased relative to what it was compared to barley, and as such, there's relatively more profit in wheat. So if you have to make a choice, what they're most likely going to do is produce more wheat and less barley than they were before the price change in wheat. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Again, firms most likely profit maximizers. Now, okay, so down here. Now, there's no working out in this question. It's actually quite easy, so I'm going to get my trusty pencil and ruler out again because I'm drawing a graph. Okay, the final of the 2018 Football World Cup is to be held in a stadium in Moscow. I couldn't say that word, so I didn't bother trying. The capacity, now this is so important, is 80,000. Now, forget the rest of the question. It just says all tickets will be sold the same price. Fine, whatever. This here represents the demand curve. Okay, no problem there. And what we're saying is, no matter what, right? So even if they sold no tickets, even if there was no demand, the supply would be 80,000 because that's the seater, that's the seating capacity of the stadium. Okay, we're told that here in the question. All right, and even if all tickets were sold at, I'll just go up the very top, well I won't actually, I'll go down somewhere along here at $1,200 per ticket, which I'm sure some actually were, but we're assuming they're all sold the same price, still the capacity is 80,000. Okay, 80,000 is the capacity of the stadium, no matter whether the price falls or rises. In the short term, they can't build a stadium. So on the day, they can't be like, oh, the price is rising, people are bidding up the price, let's add another 20,000 seats at the top. No, they can't do that, okay? That takes time. So in the short run, in the short term, the supply of tickets for this match in this stadium is fixed at 80,000. So that means the supply curve is perfectly vertical, absolutely like 100% vertical. What it's called is a perfectly inelastic supply curve, okay? There will be more on that stuff later on, but that is the reason for it. And again, I will stress, the reason for it is that at no stage in the short term can the owners or the executors of the stadium produce more seats. Okay, now yes, if they wanted the stadium bigger and it was like 3 or 4 years ago, yes, potentially they could even do something extreme and knock down the whole entire thing. But right now, as it stands, the day of the game, they can't produce any more seats, and as such, that's what supply is. Okay, have I done that? And yes, I believe I have. Okay, excellent. All right, so now we're on to another kind of graphing question for the supply curve. Okay, now what it says here, in order to reduce the consumption of sugar, the government of country C has decided to impose an indirect tax. An indirect tax is basically a sales tax. It's a tax on selling goods and services, okay? It's paid indirectly to the government by the consumer through the firm, okay? The consumer pays it to the firm, then the firm pays it to the government. As a result, the new market supply curve is given by this for sugar, where QS is the quantity of sugar supplied in thousands of tons per year, blah, 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 and P is the price of sugar in dollars per ton. On the diagram, plot and label the new supply curve for sugar. So just quickly that we can see here, this is already labeled the price of sugar and the quantity of sugar. So what we need to do now is to be able to draw this function down here, right? So what I'm going to do is just move this up a little bit so you can see, and making sure that you actually can see because I'm going off the screen here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, right, well, what we have to do is we have to find 2 points that are on this new supply function, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down QS equals minus 450 plus 5p. Okay, now like I did in the last thing, what I'm going to do is set QS equal to 0 and I'm going to solve for price. So I've got minus 450 plus 5 times p. I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to get plus 450 equals 5p. Okay, again, like in the last time, you divide both sides by the number before the letter you're trying to find. So in this case, I'm going to be dividing both by 5. 5p divided by 5 is simply 1p or p. And then 450 divided by 5 is 90. Okay, so what we're saying is 90 equals p. So at a price equal to 90, quantity supplied equals 0. All right, so get out my trusty pencil, move this down so you can see it. Here's 80, here's 100, therefore this is 90. Okay, no problem there. Then we go back to our calculations. Okay, we still have again QS equals minus 450 plus 5p, no problem there. And now I'm just going to choose something, a number that will give me an accurate number along here. And what I mean by an accurate number is like one that is marked out on the graph by a line, okay, and then one that is marked out on the graph by a line here. So I'm not great at maths, but I realize that if I put in, instead of p, if I put in, let's say 100, we'll get that. So I have QS equals minus 450 plus 500, because 5 times 100 is 500. QS equals 500 minus 450 is 50. So what we're saying here is that at a price equal to 100, quantity supplied equals 50. Now, and you may be right, there's nothing wrong with this, but if you look at this, it usually is easier, and I've done this intentionally, it usually is easier. So we'll just go at 100 and there's 50. So most likely your line would be more accurate, excuse me, if you did what? If you chose dots that were further away from each other, okay? So what I'm going to do is put down my trusty ruler, and hopefully you have a pencil that's sharper than mine. And what we're going to do now is something along that line. And like, you want it to be as accurate as possible, but what you don't want is, you don't need to worry too much if it's not absolutely perfect, okay? And what we're saying here is that this is S plus tax, like that. That's the supply curve plus the tax. There was an indirect tax on it. And then that's that question answered. Now, the last bit here is the following diagram illustrates weekly demand for sunglasses in a town of Picton. Okay, so there's the demand curve, no problem. The market supply for sunglasses in Picton is given by the equation, and I hope you can see that, and you can. Okay, QS equals minus 450 plus 100p. Okay, where QS is the quantity supplied per week and P is the price of the pair of sunglasses. On the diagram, plot and label the supply curve for sunglasses in Picton. Right, well, there are a few things that I want to kind of go on to here, right, and this is important, I suppose. And you can do this, but I just don't. So I'm making a point here of you choosing a number set that I don't think you should choose. Okay. So what we've got is QS. Right, sorry, we're going to set QS as 0. So we've got 0 equals minus 450 plus 100p. Okay, bring the 450 minus 450, or excuse me, now I'm getting silly, plus 450, because you change the sign as you bring it over the equal sign, equals 100p. We divide both sides by the number before the letter we're trying to find, and we get 1p equals 4.5, so equals p. So what we have is p equals 450, and then QS equals 0. Now if I look at this diagram here, okay, 450 isn't labeled there, so like I could put a dot there, but I don't like that because there's no like line of graph paper going across there. So that's why I just, in this instance, I wouldn't choose it, and I go back and say, okay, well, what else can I choose, right? So I'd say at a price of 5. So I'd say let's calculate the quantity supplied. So it's minus 450 plus 100 times 5. QS equals minus 450 plus 500. QS equals 50. So what we've got is at a price of 5, QS equals 50. So let's see if this works out here. Okay, well, here's 50. Okay, no problem there. Okay, and then if we go up along here, and here's 5. Okay, so we put our dot there. That works because that is on a set where two lines crossed. The graph paper has a line for both of those, okay? And then I'm going to choose at a price of 10. So I've got QS equals minus 450 plus 100 times 10. QS equals minus 450, excuse me, plus 1000, okay? And that is QS equals 1000 minus 450, which is 550. I go back to this point here, and sorry, it's 10 and 550. So I go up to 10, which is along here, so there is a graph line there, okay? And I go up to here, just making sure, yeah, absolutely, okay? And that's 550 there. So you see, again, there's two graph lines. There's two, the lines join, the graph paper joins on that point, right? Now, if we get this nice and steady and neat, okay, and here's our supply curve. Now, as you can see, that it does go through, or at least very close to, 4.5. But I didn't want to choose that because what I wanted was something that would be guaranteed to have two lines cross on the graph paper. Okay, that's what I wanted. Right, now, state the price at which 50 pairs of sunglasses are supplied. Right, that's no problem, because here's the quantity supplied and then here's the function. So instead of QS, I'm going to put in 50, and that equals minus 450 plus 100p. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 50 plus 450 equals 100p. Now I'm going to go off a bit here. I've got 500 then equals 100p. I'm going to divide both sides by 100. 100p divided by 100 is 1p, or 1, and 500 divided by 100 is 5, okay? So what we're saying is p equals 5, and I believe it's dollars, and it is, okay? Now that's the answer there. Now we did work that out already, but that's the answer for that. So it's all about substituting numbers in and then simply just knowing a little bit of theory. Okay, I really hope that helped, guys. Thank you so much.